Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel, and welcome to the 2023 Toyota Tacoma. Folks, the Toyota Tacoma in 2023 is Toyota's last old school pickup truck. The Tundra has been updated, the Sequoia has been updated. The only real old school truck that remains is the 4Runner. But this was technically updated in 2016, so it's not the oldest school truck there is. But compared to everything that is coming out today, this is, for lack of a better word, a dinosaur in a good way. So in today's video, we're going to find out if you should consider the dinosaur Tacoma or you should wait for the newer one that, if everything falls right, and looking at how Toyota updated all their old school stuff, should be coming around the corner in a year or two. Let's find out right after this. So how old are things exactly under the hood of the Tacoma? Folks, this was groundbreaking technology in 2016, but we are a little too far from 2016 today in 2023. This is a 2GR FKS. This is one of the two engine options available in the Tacoma. The other engine option is one that has had a great reputation, and that engine would be the 2.7 liter 2TR FE engine. Great engine. Not really powerful, but it's such an old school design. It is unbelievable. It makes this one look like the new kid on the block. But that was the case in 2016, where this engine was the new kid on the block. Today, this is old school, folks. You will not find a lot of cars today with this style old school engine. Let's talk about a few things with the 2GR FKS, which, by the way, the Tacoma always had a version of the GR engine, the 1GR. It was completely different than, let's say, the Lexus side or the normal front-wheel drive cars. But this 2GR FKS is almost the same as your Camry V6, Avalon V6, Sienna V6, Highlander V6, your RX 350 V6. It's almost exactly the same, just the configuration has changed for, this layout. But otherwise, internally, it's exactly the same. This engine has direct injection, which is very high tech back in 2016. No turbo, no supercharger, not really cylinder shutdown, nothing. It's just about the only technology it has is direct injection, which is not exactly only direct injection. See, this engine has Toyota's D4S system, which is basically dual injection. You have port and direct injection at the same time with its own dedicated diesel mode. What is diesel mode, you ask? This is the #1 complaint about this engine amongst owners. So in order to make sure that you never get carbon buildup for this D4S system in this specific engine, not in all D4S engines, Toyota made a mode that is kind of a cleanup mode. It'll kind of ramp up both systems, and it'll run a cycle when you're at idle for cleanup, to clean everything up, get everything taken care of. But the common symptom with that is the engine sounds like a diesel. I mean, it is extremely loud when that mode run. Enough where people, I remember in 2016, people brought their brand new trucks back to the dealership saying, there's something wrong with the engine. It's knocking, it's clattering. That is normal. And people still are concerned with it today. But just know, when you hear a Tacoma engine, all of a sudden at idle, racketing away like a diesel, you should smile, because it is trying to prevent any carbon buildup running this cleanup cycle. Now, this engine does not have any fancy electronics and groundbreaking technology and all that. And even though some folks will say, wait a second, but this engine came out in 2016, and it did have a lot of electronics and everything is electronically controlled. But the truth is, it is basic electronic controlled. I mean, without the addition of the D4S system, which added basically injectors and a little bit more wires, this is exactly the same as the previous generation Tacoma engine control wise. You don't have any super computer running this and running that. No, it's just one engine computer that runs everything. Pretty simple. We still have a mass airflow. We still have basically everything exactly the same as Toyota's been doing for a long time. Majority of the changes here were the D4S, plastic valve covers. Yes, we don't like the plastic valve covers, but this has been out since 2016. There hasn't really been issues with the plastic valve covers themselves. But it would be an understatement to say that this engine has always been good. The truth have to be said, and yours truly was there the day this engine came out, and the first problem that came up with it. In 2016, this engine had a lot of problems, and it kind of gained a slight reputation. Let's talk about some of the problems with this engine. First one is, of course, front timing cover leak. Nothing strange or old or just new to the GR series engines. They do love to develop front cover leaks. However, in 2016, most of the other iterations of the 2GR have had their front timing cover fixed or taken care of in one way, shape, or form, not the 2016 Tacoma. They had all kinds of oil leak problems. And then we had problems with the cylinder head, where a cylinder head would leak oil and coolant. And then, of course, there's a coolant pipe in the back of the engine. It used to be metal, changed it to plastic. That leaked, and we had so many problems. And at some point, in this video, we're going to mention it a little later, but if you've watched my channel, we've talked a lot about Tacoma. I told you avoid 2016 and 17 and some 18s, because those were the first 3 years where there was a lot of problems with this engine, and for that matter, this entire truck. But things got significantly quieter as 2019 rolled, and now in 2023, things are very quiet. And this engine, all its little mishaps when it first came out, has been taken care of. Equally, the long-gone V8 in the Tundra also had a lot of mishaps the day it came out, but then they were all worked out and they just kept going with the exact same thing. And then when we go look at the legendary 2GR FE, the previous engine to this one, it also had a lot of issues in the first couple of years, but then they were all worked out, and this is what makes Toyota reliable. They make a new engine. It had all kinds of problems. They figure it out. They keep improving on things, but then they don't just drop that engine after a few years and move on to something else. They keep going with the same engine for a long time, to a point where the later versions of this engine, they don't have any of the common problems because they've all been addressed from day one. And this is where we're at with the Tacoma. Anything over 2019, things are much better with the engine, to a point where we almost have no issues. This engine, ladies and gentlemen, in 2023 is basically as good as the legendary 1GR FE in the Toyota 5th generation Toyota 4Runner in my book. And for the transmission on the Tacoma, we had a 6-speed transmission, not 7, not 8, not 10. 6-speed transmission. I feel like when they came out in 2016, they could have put an 8-speed transmission. They were already coming out in other models. They didn't. They went with a 6-speed transmission. And whoa, that transmission had many, many issues. Shifting issues. It had an adaptive memory and a very sophisticated memory that learns how you drive, and then you have we had all kinds of problems with them. Basically, if you drove an older Tacoma, when I say older, I mean 16, 17, or 18. You accelerate, it's constantly hunting up, down, and people really did not like that. It was not a problem with the transmission, it was just the way it shifted. Now, starting around 2020, things improved. However, I will have to say one thing. Unlike the 4Runner, which has an ancient 5-speed automatic transmission, this still has the 6-speed, and it does occasionally still have that hunting in the transmission. Not as nearly as bad as the first few years, but they have improved on things. But still, if that is the kind of thing that bothers you, then the Tacoma potentially will still bother you in that aspect. The good news are, if you're all bothered with the entire automatic transmission thing, you can still get the Tacoma in a 6-speed manual transmission in 2023, which is really nice. I was worried that they would drop the manual transmission. They're not really top sellers, and they already dropped it in the Corolla in 23, but they did not drop it for the Tacoma, which is a really good thing. If you don't like the transmission, you don't mind a manual transmission, or actually you want a manual transmission, this is pretty much becoming one of the very few trucks that still offer a proper manual transmission in the market today. Let's take a look underneath the Toyota Tacoma, starting with the very front. I mean, this is the TRD Pro trim. It does have this giant shield that will basically get you through anything. But even when you go to the non-TRD Pro model, you still have a pretty significant metal shield. Most trucks are getting rid of these because they're too heavy, putting a little paper thing just to cover things. Well, the Tacoma never got that. Old school, talked about this. Then we look at the front suspension. I mean, this design front suspension over here has been exactly the same for a very, very, very long time. I think all trucks should have this design because if you focus on the small details, if you want to detach your knuckle, just take 2 bolts and the whole ball joint in this holder will just come off, and now you can do whatever you need to do with the knuckle. And of course, the knuckle is steel. This is old school here. And then we have a 4-piston caliper. This design has basically been here for an extremely long time. I mean, I can tell you as far as like 2000s, Forerunners and Tacomas have had a similar design caliper. It's been updated over the years, but it remains pretty similar. Not much have changed with that. And then we look at the transmission and the transmission cooler. So Toyota's been adapting this style of transmission coolers where you have coolant lines running to it, and it kind of like it acts as a cooler and a warmer with a thermostat. Thermostat is pretty cool. This is for the cooler in the radiator. I like this thermostat. Just don't forget to press it when you do service. The transmission, 6-speed transmission, still have 2 drain plugs. This one is actually the one you use to drain the fluid. This is the one to check the fluid level. And you can see here the shadows of the magnets. They still have magnets in it, and it is a metal oil pan. Otherwise, if it was not metal, we wouldn't have magnets in it with cutouts so you know where to put them. This is pretty cool. Then we look at the transfer case, old school transfer case. And yes, this is still the style where if this actuator goes out, you'll have to disassemble the entire transfer case to replace it. Not ideal, but that's what you get for old school. Folks, one thing about these transfer cases, if you have one of these, and let's say you're not using it always for off-roading, you want to engage 4-wheel drive every month at least, just to get things moving so nothing would seize, because otherwise these are pretty much problem-free. Let's look at one thing that is the frame. So Tacomas have had issues always with frames rusting out, but this in 2023 potentially is the best version of that. You look here, we have this cover. This was actually installed as part of a recall at some point, but this has it from the factory. And the other thing is this area, it has the sealer on it, and you can see the sealer kind of extends all the way back, goes all over. This is to seal any cavities that could potentially collect salt and water, and now you have corrosion. These are also coated on the inside, and it has a very heavy-duty wax coating. It's because this frame is kind of not closed all the way. They had to do this stuff. But in 23, of course, we don't have any of these issues at all. And then as we move in the middle section here, I mean, there's zero insulation. This is, of course, not pretending to be a quiet truck or anything. Zero insulation, zero covers, nothing. Everything is wide open, exhaust, everything. Here is that drive shaft that does not have serviceable U-joints. Like you can't grease them, do anything to them. That's been going on since 16. Only one of them has a serviceable like grease fitting. The rest of them do not. One of the front ones do. And then we move back here. This is where that TRD Sport exhaust is. It starts from here, goes all the way back. Not super loud, but it kind of has a OEM look to it, and that's what I like. It does, different flange and different color, but it is an OEM accessory, so it does have that OEM look to it. Then as we move our way back, you have the fuel tank right here. Something that is interesting that Tacoma never got that the 4Runner did. This is actually a plastic cover, not a metal cover. It's kind of interesting why that is, but they deemed that the plastic cover was sufficient because the design otherwise of how this fuel tank mounts to the truck is exactly the same as the 4Runner, but just the cover is not metal. Then we move to the rear end, and this is a very cool style rear end that Toyota has used forever. Basically, the differential hooks onto the housing, not the other way around. Pretty cool for service. These are super easy, very, very DIY to pull out and service. Extremely simple. And then we talk about the biggest thing with the Tacoma. And I'm gonna dare say, if it doesn't have leaf springs, it's not a real truck. How about that? Tacoma owners can actually say that. These are welcome to the 50s, where cars had leaf springs. Here we are in 2023 model with leaf springs. People say the leaf springs are not for modern cars and all this stuff. You know what? I don't recall the last time we did anything with leaf springs other than when it had a recall, and that was kind of a design thing. But this is basically here. 20 years from now, you might have to do something with them, and that's about it. They're very, very simple. And then because this is slightly lifted, this is a TRD Pro model, you have a little bit of an addition here. That's how you raise cars with a leaf spring. You just add a little bit more and it drops the rear axle, and that's how you raise the car. And of course, since this is the TRD Pro model, it has the Fox shocks that are specifically made for this car. You notice it does say TRD Pro on it. So you can't just ring up Fox shocks and they'll sell you these. No, these are actually specifically made for Toyota. Pretty cool design. I actually like how this works on road. Apart off-road, of course it works, but on road, usually off-road trucks will be all over the place, kind of unstable. It's actually pretty stable, and that is cool. And of course, the Tacoma cannot be an old school truck without having a very beautiful mounted spare tire underneath it with a chain that, by the way, rattles when you drive. It's just part of the character here. Pretty cool. I really like seeing this. I mean, look how easy it is. Everything is wide open. Nothing is really hidden in or covers or complication. You could tear this entire rear end in like a good afternoon and do whatever you need to do to it. But wait, there is one more thing about this that just shows you how committed Toyota is with this truck to old schoolness. Drum brakes, not parking brakes, no, the full brakes. I don't think you will find many cars out there with drum brakes as the main brakes in the rear in 2023, while the Tacoma is one of those very few. Folks, people will say a lot of things about the drum brakes in the Tacoma. Why couldn't they put disc brakes? Why couldn't they do this, do that? Why? It actually works perfectly fine. The brakes on the Tacoma are confidence inspiring. Of course, they're not. It's not a race car. It's not a fast car to begin with, but they work. Why change them? And the best part is they last a very long time. You probably go 100,000 miles and the brakes will be still perfectly fine. So if it ain't broke, why fix it? And that's what they did here. Let's take a look at the outside of the Tacoma. Now, one thing have to be said. I really, really like how this thing looks. There's something about the design of the Tacoma that is kind of unique. I hope you have noticed this. If you've owned one, you've seen them. The front is very big. Like big not this way, big this way. It's just such a unique design in my opinion. It's not proportional. It almost looks like the front end is larger than the rest of the truck. And that's usually not the case. Usually cars will kind of swoop down and the front will be very small. And that is, I noticed that because when you work on these, this grille will really be in your way. And 90% of the time, this is the first thing that goes when we service these so you can reach in better because the front is very high. Now, in the TRD Pro trim, Toyota lettering written out. I think every single Toyota truck should look like that, regardless if it's TRD Pro or not. But that's what they do. Something else about the TRD Pro, because we have the Toyota lettering, the radar sensor actually moved underneath it because we no longer have the standard Toyota logo where the radar sensor is, so it's down there. But there's more to this. So that we have this lower valance that did in the past give me nightmares. They usually in the early years, of course, they used to pop here and we have all kind of problem. Of course, that is long gone. I don't know why that is here. It just kind of makes the truck bigger, but that's what they did. I wonder how this would look like in body color, in this color, but that is the valance. Don't hit these because they are not very well secured. So note to those out there driving a Tacoma. Something about the TRD Pro trim. We have Rigid Industries fog lights. They are pretty cool and they still going on here. These are actually very expensive lights, and to see them original on a Tacoma is pretty cool. But then we look at the smaller details. Now, the headlights have gotten updated throughout the years, and I think this is the sharpest looking one. Here's a video of that lit. But then if you look really, really close, it actually says TRD on this light, and when we go look at the other light, it'll actually say Pro. That is the small touch that makes every single Tacoma owner smile. This old school stuff that shows, we don't have gizmos and all that, but we have the old school things that gets people excited. And then as we move here, we have the fake hood scoop. Now, usually when manufacturers put a fake hood scoop, people roast them on it, except the Tacoma. I love the fake hood scoop, and I don't want it to be anything different. I don't want it to go away. It just gives this a character. When you sit in the driver's seat and you look down, you see this, it's a good view. But they did a lot to add this hood scoop. It's not just, an aftermarket add-on and that's it. Because they had to actually curve the hood down. I wish they would just make it functional secretly, but we're okay with it being fake. But there's a little bit more about this than just the hood scoop. If you look here, so we have a little sticker and it says TRD Pro on it. But if you really look close at this, it actually have like a little map on it. Wonder what the map is? Probably somewhere in the publications where it tells you what that map is. But it's very subtle and it's very, very cool. I really like it. Now, the paint quality on this is not that of the 4Runner, but it is pretty good. Considering everything, it is pretty good. You will see a few specks here and there if you really look hard. But overall, paint quality in the Tacoma is almost the same as the 4Runner, which is really on the next level. As we make our way to the side, these are the TRD Pro wheels in 2023. I think they look pretty cool with Goodyear Wrangler tires. Pretty aggressive tires, however, they're not loud, and I like that. And then when you look here, really close, it also says TRD on the upper control arm. Pretty cool, pretty visible. When you walk next to the truck, you see it. And then the fender arches are black. I usually don't like fender arches that are kind of black and not body color. But in this, I think it's fitting. It does look right. As we make our way to the side, this does have the smart key. This is a TRD Pro, of course, only in the front. This is old school. Be happy you even have a smart key. And these mirrors are not automatic folding mirrors. Talk about an old school truck here. As we make our way here to the biggest old school thing, the fuel door. It is not lockable. It's just anybody can walk to any Tacoma and do this, and you can access the fuel door. One small concern or complaint, if you would. So you painted this, and basically anybody can walk to your very beautiful orange Tacoma. They open the fuel door, and we look here. The paint is not complete. We missed the paint here, we missed a little bit here. Wish they would have painted this a little bit nicer. Not the end of the world, but it's just a small observation. But the biggest thing is another TRD Pro here, which this time is stamped in the sheet metal. Pretty cool. They started doing this in 2022, but I wish they would have moved the Pro next to it, made it a little longer. That's the only observation, but nonetheless, it is pretty cool. But where things kind of get a bit much with the TRD Pro is when you look at the back, and it also says TRD Pro here. I think that's a little much. But then, of course, when you move to the other side, it also has TRD Pro engraved here. A bit much with the signs, but it's okay. It's pretty cool. Then we look at the back here, and this is possibly one of the most old school stuff you will see in trucks these days. So it says Toyota here, very small, Tacoma very large. That's pretty cool. 4x4, of course. I think that 4x4 is kind of a joke. It's TRD Pro is meant for off-roading. Of course, it's 4x4, but they did put that as well. But then the handle. This is not some button. This is a physical handle to open the bed. And right next to it is a camera, which completely looks out of place, looks like an add-on later. But then we have a keyhole. These are disappearing from cars altogether. In the Tacoma, you have it on the bed as well. But then you open the bed and it is soft open. Thank you for this major upgrade. The bed is, of course, where the Tacoma is at. You have multiple configurations. This is one of them. And the best thing is the bolts that hold the bed to the frame, these are actually T55, they're visible. Most trucks will try to hide this stuff and kind of make it look cool and everything. In the Tacoma, there was absolutely no attempt to hide these. Basically, you take these 6 bolts, a few connectors, and you can pull the bed off this frame. Pretty cool that they're still visible. I like that. Folks, the exterior of the Tacoma is just timeless. I mean, look at this very basic taillight. There's nothing to it. There's no crazy swooping design. Basically, the craziest thing is these 2 fins that, in the eyes of the engineer that designed it, it makes an absolute difference in aerodynamics. In the real world, it absolutely makes nothing. But that's about it with the taillight. Very basic. The exterior of this truck is extremely basic. There's only one thing that I slightly dislike about the exterior. It's this curve. I think if you would have made this straight, would have gave it more of an old school character, and it would have gave me a little bit better visibility when you look in the back, but it's not the end of the world. I really like the exterior of the Tacoma. I think it is basic, but it does have a few things that are interesting in it. What about the interior of the Tacoma? Did we get any updates here? And this is kind of a question that answers itself after you've been watching this video for a bit. Things here are extremely old school, and not only from the technology aspects and everything, even materials. When we look at things like the dash, they don't even use this style plastic in other cars anymore. They switched to other lighter material stuff and everything. Materials you see here are very old. And this is intentional. This is the whole point of this interior. This interior does not have fancy materials and swooping designs and all that mess. They don't have that because they know they actually got this one part very good with the Tacoma. Usually Toyota seems to miss who their buyer is, but with the Tacoma they really knew who their buyer is and they kept things exactly how they like them. See, when you go buy a Tacoma, you're not looking for the latest high-tech equipment and all that. You want simplicity. You want an honest truck that is old school, that works very well, doesn't have any gimmicks or features that you'll never use or you don't even know how to use or you don't really care about. We start looking at the small details here. Number one, you don't really have soft touch materials here, and that is intentional. This is a truck. It doesn't need to have all leather and very fragile materials here. Nothing is fragile here. Yes, people will say, well, it's all plastic, hard plastic. Yeah, but it's good quality hard plastic that will not break, will not be hard to clean, and it's there, it works, life is good. And then we look at the center stack here, or thereof the lack of things. You have a physical shifter that is still basically exactly the same as a 2010 Toyota. And then right next to it is a disappearing feature. A manual parking brake. This is just, if there's anything old school about this, it's this. Because even other manufacturers, even in their old designs, they have electronic parking brake. But over here, still have a handbrake, and I like that it's not a foot pedal operated one. It's here because even this was disappearing in the automotive industry for a while. Everybody's moving to a foot pedal operated one. Tacoma didn't get that memo. But then we look further. Of course, being in a Tacoma, every single control is physical button. Now, the one thing about the Tacoma that has to be said is in the TRD Pro model, which is this one. This is like the most serious off-roading model. We do not have an option of a manual transfer case. It's still a rotary dial. While it works great, I think this is something they could have done. And some people look at it as this is a return to old school. But this is what this truck is about. You don't buy this truck because it's high-tech and latest and the greatest gizmos. No, you buy it because it's simple, honest truck. That's the whole point of this. But then to make this review kind of comprehensive to everybody, some of the crowds that do like the modernness, this was a groundbreaking update to the Tacoma in 2016 because it used to be a lot more simple. Now we have smart key, we have blind spot monitor, and all these features that are still super old. They were super old in 2016, and they're way too old in 2023, and I love it for it because operating this is like a time capsule. You get in here, things are old. I mean, you look at the AC vents, there's this rotary thing that doesn't even have a button separate to shut it off. You just flip the vent down, and that's what shuts it off. This is super. You see where they're going with this? Simplicity. If you buy this for its simplicity. And then we talk about things like the almost aftermarket looking radio. I mean, this thing is so old. And by today's standards, it is so old. I mean, by 2016 standards, it was very old. And today, it's even more old. It's slow, it's featureless. And guess what? The typical Tacoma buyer doesn't care. That's the bottom line. You don't buy this for technology, folks. This is a comfortable interior. It's very functional, durable, easy to keep clean, and will last a considerable amount of time because the focus here was durability over look and feel and fanciness. And it really shows when you step into the Tacoma. And then we look kind of beyond the obvious. The first thing is Tacoma in 2023 still have possibly the oldest smart key system, even though this was groundbreaking to add in 2016 here, because we never thought there would be a Tacoma with a smart key. But the smart key here is obsolete, is the word for it. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They didn't change it. They changed the 4Runner, but they didn't change the Tacoma. We still have the oldest style smart key system here, but it goes more than that. Now, I'm sitting here, I'm a Toyota technician. I've worked on a lot of Toyotas from olden days to today. I still work on them in my shop. You look at the materials and the overall layout of everything. I mean, this is basically Toyota from 2010. The material of the headliner, the material of plastic, the handles, the way things are constructed here. They're simply not from 2016, possibly from 2010. And this was where the update of the Tacoma kind of went more toward the engine, the frame, some of the transmission, some of the other stuff, but not really the interior too much. I mean, this steering wheel is basically identical to that of the 4Runner. Works great, and you can tell that some of the technology features like the lane keep warning and the adaptive cruise control, they were add-ons. They were not really intended to be here. And every single Toyota have moved to the new style steering wheel where they no longer have the stock cruise control. They no longer have, the buttons the way they are laid out. Tacoma didn't get that memo altogether. Things are very, very old school. And even behind the scenes, the wiring is simple, the layout is simple, the way this dash is put together is old school style, which makes service simple, everything else simple, and basically this is tried and true. There's nothing new here, and it remains exactly the same in 23, which is pretty cool. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the Toyota Tacoma, and the truth have to be said, there is very little I actually do not like about it. The first thing is the transmission. Even though it has been updated, it's a lot better than the early years, it still has that hunting feeling. Not as bad, but it's nonetheless still there. And anybody who seeks an old school truck, this might be an issue. That's really about it. You still have the manual transmission option, which is, as old school as they can be, but the hunting remains not as bad, but it's still there. But otherwise, to make this video more comprehensive and kind of not just focus on one group of people, I have to say this. I love trucks that are simple and focused on what they need to be. But if you are the kind of person that wants amenities and features and all this good stuff, this will severely disappoint you. I mean, things are extremely old school here, and that's the whole point. Don't go into a Tacoma expecting modern amenities and features and cool radio and cool this and this is touch that. None of that exists. This is basically, they are still happy that you have a tiny little screen in the gauge. They're still proud of that. Things are extremely old school, folks. This is not a truck you buy because of any singular feature. And perhaps this is where it makes more sense in the lower trims, actually, because really in the higher trims, all you're getting is just smart key, push button start, which almost doesn't match the character of this truck. Let's talk about a common problems update. And we've talked about the Tacoma common problems, and that video, people were concerned. Is this even still a Toyota? Because we talked about the 16, 17, and some 18s. But today in 2023, I want to give you an update, kind of the last 3 years. How have they been? There is one problem that I don't understand why Toyota has not resolved, and we still are in the same holding pattern on, which is if you live in hot climate area with your beautiful Tacoma here, you would get almost no AC in hot climate, traffic, stop and go, really hot climate, because the Tacoma still in 2023 does not have an auxiliary cooling fan. You only have the big mechanical one. And apparently this AC system needs that auxiliary cooling fan in really high demand on the AC. So yeah, if you live in really hot climate, you have to pay more to add an auxiliary fan, which they do have a TSB and a kit to add all that. But I don't understand, why couldn't they just add that, raise the price a little bit? Everybody will be extremely happy. The AC temperatures, the AC pressures will be very low, and life will be very, very good. Well, they didn't do that in 2023. Other stuff is, while we're talking about AC, equally in very hot climates, the AC tends to whistle. And as soon as it shuts off, it starts whistling and whistling. And this is something, they updated the evaporator to help it. But because this is, in a way, kind of a piggyback AC system, because I feel like they designed the Tacoma without the new refrigerant in mind, and when they added, because there's a lot of AC problems with this truck, and they remain, and that's just the way it is. And then there's one last thing on the AC. Told you, this AC was kind of like a piggyback system. The compressor, AC compressor failure rates are pretty high compared to other Toyota models. Now, they're still relatively reliable compared to others, but in the Toyota world, they're not very reflective of how old school this truck is. And the surprise is, the compressor is actually not made by Denso. That's just the way it is. So before you go looking for a Denso unit when your AC compressor goes out, there's actually not a Denso unit, because it was never made by Denso to begin with. Perhaps that's the problem to begin with. And then this is what I call the Tacoma Special. This truck is very sensitive to modifications when it comes to the driveline angle. I mean, even without modifications, they love to vibrate, and you have high-speed vibration, and you'll go to the dealership and they'll do this and do that, and it still has vibrations. But again, this has to do with this old school design. Remember, we talked about a little bit ago in the video, this has leaf springs. Things move in the back. It's a truck. This is a truck. Every time you see a truck with coil springs in the back and you drive a Tacoma, you can tell them this technically is not a real truck, because this has drum brakes and leaf springs, and that's how trucks should be. So vibration is kind of a byproduct of that old schoolness right there. So just be aware, if you are really sensitive to vibration and high-speed vibration and all that, perhaps the Tacoma will annoy you sooner or later, because this problem doesn't have to do, it's not really a problem, it's just a nature of the Tacoma to vibrate. Let's talk about the TRD Pro trim, which we have right here, which now has kind of embedded lettering on the side of the bed since 2022, which I really like. I think this is pretty cool. So if you've watched my video on the TRD Pro 4Runner, I told you that I actually do not like the TRD Pro 4Runner. It was just too much, and I felt the TRD Off-Road was a better trim. But when it comes to the Tacoma, I actually really like the TRD Pro trim. It's just the change of the suspension and the whole package. They drive better, they're nicer, they are more expensive, fortunately, and they're really hard to find. But if it is in your budget to get a TRD Pro Tacoma, you will not be disappointed. A little bit over the top on the TRD and Pro logos all over the place, as we've talked about before when we looked at the outside. But overall, the way it drives and the way it feels, it's really worth it. I really like it, and this is, I had to say, make a separate section about this. I like the way it drives. While it is really, the TRD Pro trim is more off-road focused, and it does great in off-road, but on-road behavior is really good. The exhaust is a TRD exhaust, but unlike the 4Runner, which was really loud and droney, this one is actually nice. It does have a little bit louder exhaust note to it, but it's not droney. Highway drives, it's pretty quiet. I really like the TRD Pro trim, but something about the way Toyota does things sometimes. So you go buy the TRD Pro because it has the custom suspension and all that, but then they go around and make their own lift kit. Folks, the Tacoma does have a Toyota kind of official lift kit now. Some folks have mentioned, and I have not tested both of them, but some folks have mentioned that perhaps the lift kit is better for off-roading than the TRD Pro one. So if you're really buying TRD Pro primarily for off-roading, perhaps just a normal one with a lift kit might work better. Just thought I'd tell you about that. So should you buy a 2023 Tacoma or should you wait for the new one? Folks, I love the 2023 Toyota Tacoma. I love it for its simplicity, its focus. There's no gimmicks or features here that are kind of meant to distract you from the main thing. No. This is basic form, kind of back to basics, and Toyota slowly is moving away from that, but not in this, not in the Toyota 4Runner, and there are a few models in between that are like that. This is truly a focused truck. It is not about modern features and gimmicks and all that. It is just about being a simple truck that works. I really love it for that, and you will not find a lot of trucks in the market today that are this focused, this basic. Most of them are moving into the modern gizmos and all that. This remains possibly one of the oldest and kind of the most focused. The newer one will likely not be like that. We've already seen that with the Tundra, we've seen that with the Sequoia. They're not bad trucks, but they're different. They don't have that old school feel anymore. This one still does. And this one still makes its older brother, the Toyota Hilux, proud. This basically has that DNA of the Hilux since day one, and it continues to do so. Folks, this is not a truck for those that want to switch cars every few years and they like latest tech, and this is a long-term truck. As long as you avoid the 2016 to mid-18 Tacomas, you should be good. And in 2023, things got updated and the common problem list really shrunk down a lot. If you watch my previous video on the common problems with Tacomas, you'll notice that things really shrunk down here, and that is a good thing. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.